Good afternoon. My name is Monica Dietz, and I am one of the assistant superintendents for the Diocese of Cleveland. Today, we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about the MAP assessment. Specifically, I want to talk about why we give MAP, which assessment you should administer, and also when we'll be giving the assessment this year. And finally, we'll review some of our testing best practices. So we give MAP for two reasons, really. First, MAP helps us inform our instruction, and it does that by providing us with students' current levels of achievement. It also shows us students' growth over time, which is valuable information. This year, like years in the past, we will give the assessment 3 times. Schools have a little bit of flexibility this year, specifically in the fall. We recognize schools start at different times, and so the assessment should be given 2 to 4 weeks after you start school. It should be given in 3 consecutive weeks, and it must be done by October 6th. When it comes to winter and spring, we have 4-week windows, which you can see, and your school should just choose the 3 consecutive weeks that best fit your schedule. I'd like to review the assessments you should be giving. So all of our schools administer the reading and the math assessment to their kindergarten through 8th graders. In kindergarten and first grade, students take the K-2 MAP growth. In 2nd to 5th grade, they take the 2 to 5 MAP growth. One point I'd like to note is that if you have 2nd graders that scored below 170 at the end of 1st grade, you could consider giving them the K-1 assessment again. One thing is we don't want to switch our assessment throughout the year. So if you start on the K-1 assessment, you want to stick with it. If you start with the 2 to 5 assessment, you want to stick with it because that's how we can measure a student's growth. That said, if a student's really close, like 168, recognizing that we're taking the same assessment throughout the year, I would lean to giving them the 2 to 5 test. In grade 6 and 8, we give the 6+ MAP growth. And when it comes to math, if you have students taking algebra or geometry, you should be administering that test to them. Another point, some of our schools give the language usage assessment. That's a school choice. You should discuss that with your school. And also, especially our scholarship providers give the science assessment in grades 5 and 8, but your school may give that 5 through 8 or just in other grades. It's depending on your school's choice. A couple points to note. If a student in K-2 scores over 190, you should transition them to the 2 to 5 assessment, no matter what grade they're in. If you have 3rd graders looking for the reading guarantee score, 3rd grade reading guarantee, that is a 194. That is the number. It didn't change for this coming school year. If you ever have any questions about which assessment you should be giving your students, just reach out to me and I'm happy to collaborate with you. So when you're preparing to give the assessment, I just want to explore some best practices. Here I have some questions that as a school you can explore, maybe in PLCs, maybe as an entire school at a faculty meeting, but it depends on your wireless capability and how big your school is, all of that. But you want to think about what schedule is best for your students. What day of the week should you give the assessment? What time of the day is best for students to test? All of that has an impact. You also want to consider what devices the students are taking this assessment on. Is an iPad best? Is a Chromebook best? Is an actual computer best? It depends on the grade oftentimes, so that is a great discussion that you can have within your school, and obviously it depends on the resources you have. Same thing with resources. How many adults should be in the room? Sometimes more than one person is beneficial, especially in the lower grades. And we want to make sure students know why they're taking the test and also are aware of how long this assessment is going to take them. So take some time as a school and discuss all of these questions and come up with a plan that works really well for you. I want to share, there is a link. This is a little bit older, but it's 4 conversations to have with students before fall testing, and you may want to take a peek at that and use it. There's also a practice test, and if you are a teacher in K-2, I would really encourage you to administer that practice test, especially sometimes even in 3rd grade. By the time they get to 4th grade, your kids have taken this assessment so many times they probably don't need the practice test. But the practice test looks like this. All right, you click on one of these, and then there's a video here about the test, get ready for the test, and also allows your students to answer some questions so they're familiar with the actual assessment itself and what that looks like when you're actively taking it. If you want to explore some active proctoring practices, there is a PDF that can guide you in proctoring the assessment, and you could click on that link and explore that. Some things you want to keep your eye out for are, rapid guessing or students taking an extremely long amount of time. We'll explore that in a moment. One thing I would say is if you are giving the assessment, you want to keep an eye on the computer and see who's taking it really fast, who's taking it really slow. Like, you can track what number question your kids are on. That said, we don't want to just give the test and then go to our computer and sit there for the whole period. So talk about that and see really the best way to administer the test to your grade and your school. One other thing you may want to explore are the 2020 time norms. So these norms were new last year. They have nothing to do with the COVID impact. They were created prior to that. So if your teachers go through this, they can see what the 50th percentile looks like for each subject in their grade, and they can also be aware of what average student growth looks like each time. It's also a great idea to take a look at the time norms. So you can see here, you are able to choose the subject, and also then you see the actual amount of time that it's the average amount of time students take. In kindergarten, no matter the subject area, it's usually about a half an hour, and in junior high, it's usually about an hour. If a student is taking a significant amount of time, like they're on question 5 and everyone else is on question 15, you may want to encourage them to make their best guess on questions they don't necessarily know the answer to, because the results show usually that spending all of that time on questions they don't know doesn't improve their score. Same thing if a student is on question 15 and everyone else is on question 5, we want them to slow down. For all grades, students taking the test under 20 minutes isn't really giving you valuable information. I know that can be tough in kindergarten, but certainly in the older grades, they should be spending a longer amount of time on that. So a few things you could do. Tap on the student and ask them how the test is going, if they're going really fast or really slow. And likely they're going to tell you it's going well no matter what. So but you don't want to tell them before you give them the opportunity to stop, tell you how it's going. And then you either encourage them to keep in mind this test is going to take you about 40 minutes. We're going to have a break after 20, so don't rush. Or if they're taking a lot of time, you can, after they say it's going great, you can encourage them or remind them that no matter what, they're going to get half the questions right, half the questions wrong. So if they're struggling on a question, to make their best guess. But if you're a teacher, you should be aware of the testing time norms. And just a couple next steps. If you are looking for a way to encourage your students to grow in certain areas, you can always explore the growth mindset. I have a couple links from Carol Dweck explaining it, and that has worked really well for some of our schools, is putting an emphasis on that growth mindset. And finally, I would just encourage you to start slow and recognize you don't need to read every report that NWEA publishes. You could maybe start with the class report and go from there. Also, it's always great to lead with research. So John Hattie, who is a well-known researcher, he puts together a lot of research that other people do and then makes publications on that. And he said one of the most impactful pieces on student learning is collective teacher efficacy. Now, what is collective teacher efficacy? You could look it up, but in short, it is the belief that school staff can have a positive impact on student learning with the shared belief that they will have that great impact. Now they have to use data to inform their instruction and all of that. It's not just like, yeah, we got it, we're going to do great. But if you have that collective belief and you work towards it, that's going to have a major impact on not only your students, but the students in your entire school. And then just be flexible with yourself and understand that, things change. And COVID is a great example of that. All right. And finally, there's just one other resource. I linked that PERCH resource. So if you want to look at the growth mindset, there are a lot of great resources on that website. Thank you for taking the time to join me and explore MAP, and feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks.